the first of two legs of our election debate. And as you can see, the supporters of the various parties have come out in numbers. We are at Mount Pleasant in Hermanus, and as we just wait for the crowd to quieten down, and then we'll get into the issues. And as I said before the break, the EFF has since joined us, so just waiting for the crowd to settle down, and then we'll get into the issues. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And let's get on with it once again. So we're back live on Morning Live on SABC. We have been joined during the break by the EFF, and their representative this morning is Mr. Melikaya Xeko. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
So you have a minute to tell us what the EFF has to offer the electorate.
As the EFF, we are firstly going to nationalize the minds of South Africa in order for them to belong under the state, to be able to boost the South African economy. We will also expropriate South Africa's land to be under the custodianship of the state so that we could be able to do the equal redistribution of our land. And then we will also provide free quality decolonized education to ensure that our children and the future generation is being fed information that could be able to take them forward. We will also be able to give and double the grants that are currently given from all spheres of grants, be it child grants, be it old age. And we will also ensure that we build state capacity by making sure all the state entities have got capacity to be able to sustain themselves, and also build industrial zones to ensure that we bring back the factories that have been shut down since the takeover of the African National Congress and the DA in the Western Cape, and ensure that we are able to create jobs and abolish tenders to be able to curb the Bosasa kind of things that are being implemented by the ANC.
Well, thank you to the economic freedom fighters. So we've heard from the various leaders certain touch points that they believe are important to address. The land question stands out, as does the question of unemployment, and of course the socio-economic ills that have also been highlighted by everyone on the panel by and large. But I want to start with that triple nexus of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We always hear about the unemployment. We talk in part about the inequality, but the poverty question seems to be one that nobody is really willing to address, or maybe it's difficult to get to the answers of how do we eradicate poverty in this country. And I want to start with our candidate from COPE, because you were the only one who mentioned poverty. So with regard to poverty, what would COPE do to try and to reverse the tide there?
Yes, Sakina, let me just say that if you look at the Gini coefficient and you apply it to South Africa, and particularly in the Western Cape, you would see the disparity between rich and poor. It's vast. If you look at the wealth in the Western Cape, the multi-millionaires that we have in the Western Cape, and you come to the townships, I can take you to all those townships, Bonteheuwel, Langa, Mitchells Plain, you name it. There are young people standing on the streets without a job. Young people with matric certificates, young people with degrees standing, not having a job. And it's time that we are going to have to change that. And the first thing that we're going to address is entrepreneurial skills and developing that and teaching young people, because it's no use you're going to stand in the queue for a job. It's no use you're going to fill in loads and loads of applications, but you are turned down.
But so what are you going to teach them? You're talking about unemployed graduates. Isn't it a problem when you have a graduate who cannot pull himself up by the bootstraps? Isn't that a problem in itself?
I think the first thing that we are going to do is to teach them how to start your own business, and then also how to start a successful business. And as the government and as the state, we are also going to provide start-up capital for those young people, and to also bring in successful entrepreneurs.
With money that you're going to get from where? Where are you going to get the money from? The state doesn't have money.
Yeah, the state will have money if they don't borrow $6 billion rand every week and spend $5 billion to pay on just the interest. Now that's the problem that we have. because the state cannot govern this country properly, and it's time that Cope governs. It's time that Cope takes over.
Got you, Cope. Let me come to the Democratic Alliance, who are effectively in charge in this province. So what have you done about the poverty question?
So I think that is exactly the point, and you would have seen in this campaign our leader Musi Maimane saying we need at least one job in every household, because that makes the difference. But to enable jobs, and the previous speaker, we've got to get investment, and we've got to create an ecosystem and an environment for growth. We've got to be able to attract investment, and quite frankly at the moment under the ANC rule in South Africa, we've actually got poorer in the last 10 years. We haven't actually managed to create an environment that attracts investment. And
is that the real story, though? Are people really getting poorer, or is it some people that are getting poorer?
No, and overall, in general, our people are getting poorer. As a country, we're getting poorer. Our economic growth rate has reduced year on year. 0.8% is our economic growth rate in South Africa at the moment. With an inflation rate like we've got, fuel prices going up as of today, these have massive impacts on general society, and we get poorer. So these are structural changes that have to be made at a national level, but even at a provincial level, we've shown that it can be done. We've attracted the investment. That's why we've got the lowest unemployment rate in South Africa in this province and created the most jobs.
So let me go to ATM. Are you in agreement? Do you agree that this question is being effectively dealt with here in the Western Cape, the question of poverty, by the Democratic Alliance?
Yeah, for us as the ATM, we think the issue of poverty starts within the people that run the economy. If we have people that haven't got humaneness within them, we have a problem. So this is why I believe in this thing of humanism. Because once we have Ubuntu, all of us, then the problem begins to be solved, because then you begin to see that it's not necessary that people should be poor. So for us, one of the first things we're going to do when we take this government is to ensure that even when we issue out tenders, those tenders must ensure that they have a component of entrepreneurship, they have a component of employment, so that you don't have a situation where you spend government money, but there's no return in terms of what is that people are getting. So this is what we're going to do. So we think that poverty can be eradicated. And one of the key things that we're going to do is to get rid of corruption. We think without corruption, there's enough money in this country. So there's too much corruption. In fact, even the laws in this country, we've got laws that enable corruption. PFMA is one of the biggest enablers of corruption. They've got what they call deviation within that system. So that deviation is the biggest loophole that all the practitioners of corruption are using. So first thing we're going to do is also to review that PFMA and get rid of all the loopholes in the system, so that all the money that must go to the people must get to the people. There's enough wealth in this country for everyone. We must inculcate the spirit of humaneness, we must inculcate Ubuntu, then we'll solve the problem.
Let me come to Mr. Ibrahim Rasool of the ANC. Now, you heard the abolition of the tender system, corruption, and of course a practically stagnant economy. And we are in the Western Cape, of course, where the DA is the ruling party, but in all the other provinces it is the African National Congress. What is your response to all of these issues?
Well, look, I think that, that very clearly the ANC is taking the lead through all the commissions of inquiry to make sure that corruption is certainly going to be dealt with. And already I think that others can protest, but what the ANC has to do is to actually govern. We are the government of the country, and we need to do something about it. I think that certainly what we need to understand is that over the last 25 years, one of the core ways in which poverty has been fought has been the fact that there are 17 million people who are on one form of social security or the other. That's an enormous barrier against poverty. I think asset poverty, certainly the fact that almost 5 million people have a tradable collateral asset called a house, is certainly something you can lend against for your children's education. And when the expropriation without compensation law comes in, it expands the asset base of people. What we further need to do is to say that there are ways in which the state can initiate starter jobs such as EPWP, and certainly millions of those can be created. But the real growth against poverty certainly comes in when you have one-stop entrepreneurial shops in which young people with a business idea can have the idea evaluated, can be recommended for funding, can be given the kind of assistance that is required, and prepare them for the fourth industrial revolution. Now, I think that others can dream up these things, but these are actually the things that the African National Congress has to do. The President has committed and has started the process of raising $3 trillion rands worth of investments. We're already beginning to see that coming in. And part of that comes to the Western Cape as well. And so certainly I think that there are people who can open the factories, but there are other people who get the investment in. And so certainly I think that we need to get the real jobs in the economy, and it starts off with every community having a real economic development center as a one-stop shop for entrepreneurship.
All right, very, very interesting responses, I must say. And it's going to be interesting to see whether the electorate actually buys into what is being said here, because very little of what I'm hearing right now is new, and yet we still have these problems that we have in South Africa. So, but we'll get to the floor. We'll get you an opportunity to ask these questions and interrogate these leaders. But I want to go to Patricia de Lille. You have the mic there. So talk to us about poverty and inequality. You were previously, and I hate to bring this up, but these are the facts. History will judge us. You were the executive mayor of the city of Cape Town previously. And when you listen to the talks that are going on about poverty levels in this province, how do you respond?
Sakina, the cause of poverty and why South Africans are feeling poorer is because our population growth is more than our economic growth. That's the first point. But then there's a face to poverty, and this is what people are in denial. And I'm also sick and tired of being the only woman amongst these men all the time. But the face of poverty is feminization. The face of poverty is a black woman and our young people. And how do you get people out of poverty? The first solution is education, education, education. We must break the cycle of poverty where the mother was poor, the daughter was poor, and then the younger one. So there's a face to poverty, and that's where the inequality also comes in. But there's also a mismatch between the skills that's produced in our country to what is needed in the economy. And that is why we have to retrain our young people, especially in technology and the digital space. And we need to teach our young women. We bring all of them because that is the future for our country. But also, there's a lack of tradesmen in this country. We must encourage our young people to go into apprenticeships of electricians, plumbers, welders. That is what is needed in the country. But the inequality stems from, there are two types of inequality. The first inequality you measure by the highest earner and then the lowest earner. And so certainly in terms of inequality, the highest inequality is in Gauteng, where the highest income live, and then followed by the Western Cape and followed by KZN. But we are the most unequal society in the whole world. So it is a national problem to deal with inequality and to deal with our sad
Where are
past.
the solutions, though? That's what we are after. Because 25 years into this democracy, we seemingly don't have the solutions. And by the way, listening to you, I still don't have the answer as to how we are going to get rid of the scourge of poverty and inequality in this country. PAC, you take your turn.
Thank you, Sakina. In 1994, when people voted, there were two issues. That was black expectations and white fears. And for the past 25 years, what the ruling party has been trying to do was trying, or is still trying to address white fears at the expense of black expectations. Now, the issue that we need to really put our fingers on is up until when are we going to address white fears at the expense of black expectations? That's the first issue. And let us also address the elephant in the room. There's 10 of us here, and more than 5 of us have been fingered in corruption in this panel, right? More than 50% of the panel, they've been fingered one way or the other in corruption. We need to address that, because once you address corruption, then we are moving towards addressing the issue of poverty. That's the first issue. The second issue is that, you know, when countries like Zimbabwe and the others got independence, there was a very strong political will in terms of investing in education. I want to differ with my former colleague. She was my mayor in the city of Cape Town. It's not education, education, education only. You need to have accountability, and there must be consequences for those who have been found corrupt. There has been commissions after commissions after commissions with no consequences. That's the second issue. And the whole issue of structural adjustment policies that the ANC government agreed post-1994 is catching up with us. So you need a party that is going to do away with just being scared of the West and ensure that the real African issues are put at the center stage. And that one party is the PAC.
All right.
Now, lastly, Sakina, you know, there is one issue that I want to put an emphasis on. Before 1948, the Afrikaners were the poorest of the poor, right? But it took the National Party less than 50 years to ensure that they are the top of the food chain. And yet 25 years into our democracy, the ANC has been very scared to ensure that at least African people do climb the ladder. That's the problem that we're having in this country. Thank you.
All right, tell you what, we're going to pause here because we need to go to a news break, but very interesting points being raised, and we shall come back and revisit them, but I also want to give the audience enough time to ask their questions. But we'll come back to the question of corruption as well. We'll come to the question of land too, and I know exactly who I haven't quizzed yet, so we'll come back to you. But, Mr. Bafo, you'll tell us when we get to corruption who the more than 50% of the panel is that have been fingered in corruption. With that, it's back to Studio 11 and mid-news.